guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm a fourth year medical student, and in today's video, I want to talk about the MCAT. I know it's been quite a few years for me. I actually took the MCAT in the spring of 2016, but I still want to talk about it in today's video for mainly two reasons. Reason number one is that the MCAT is a very important exam that you have to take if you're applying to medical schools. Reason number two is that since 2016, I've taken many more exams, and I think having that experience enables me to provide you with different and hopefully helpful perspectives in terms of exam preparation. At the end of this video, I'm going to reveal my test score, so please watch the video and remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it. Let's get started. So I'm going to divide up today's video into 4 different areas. First, I'm going to talk about what the MCAT is and what's covered on the exam. 2, I'm going to talk about my study schedule. And 3, I'm going to talk about the study resources that I used, including content review books, whether or not I recommend a test preparation course, and what I did with the practice exams. And last but not least, number 4, I'm going to just provide you with some of the general tips and advice that I have in terms of preparing for the MCAT. The MCAT is a really long exam. The exam itself takes about 6 hours, and if you're counting in all the break times, then it takes a little bit over 8 hours to finish the MCAT. The entire exam is multiple choice questions, and the exam is divided into 4 different sections. For each section, you are given 59 multiple choice questions, and for 3 of the sections, you're given 95 minutes, and you have 90 minutes for one of the other sections. There are 4 different content areas. I'm going to be peeking at my notes because they have really long and complicated names. So section number 1 is the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. I think of it as the general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics section. And section number 2 is called CARS, is the critical analysis and reasoning skills section. And this is essentially the section for reading comprehension. If you've taken the SAT or the ACT, then you know what this is about. You're given passages and you're asked questions to see if you understand what's going on in the passages. And for the MCAT, they typically choose passages from the humanities or the social science disciplines. Section number 3 is the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. And this is essentially the big biology section. And some biochemistry is also tested in this block. And last but not least, you have the behavioral science, which is the section that covers psychology as well as sociology. Each section has a score up to 132, so if you do the math, 132 times 4, the highest score that you can get on the MCAT is 528. When it comes to scheduling the MCAT and figuring out how much time you should spend to prepare for the exam, I think it really depends on the person. There isn't a single schedule that suits everybody. And there are 2 key things that you need to consider. Number 1 is how well you know the content to begin with. And number 2 is whether or not you're going to be studying for the MCAT part-time or full-time. So let's go over each key area one by one. So let's say that you are taking it when you're in college and you haven't had a chance to take your organic chemistry or biochemistry course in college, then I would definitely say you need to spend a little bit more time preparing for the MCAT. It's still possible to learn the area on your own, but you just need to spend more time to prepare for the exam compared to someone who has taken those courses in college. So you really need to know what's covered on the exam and whether or not you are already familiar with those subject areas that's being tested. And for my point number 2, you need to figure out if you'll be studying for the exam part-time or full-time. If, let's say, you're taking a gap year and you have the space in your schedule to study for the exam full-time, then perhaps a month or maybe 2 months will be enough if you're studying 5 to 8 hours a day. However, if you are still in college and you don't plan on taking gap years, or perhaps you've graduated college and you're working full-time and you only have 2 to 3 hours to study for the exam every single day, then I would recommend you to spend more time, perhaps 3 plus, maybe 4 months to prepare for the exam. So before you decide on how much time to give yourself, definitely consider those 2 points that I mentioned. In terms of study resources, just a quick disclaimer, I'm going to talk about what I did, and I hope by sharing my experiences, you can have better insight to figure out how to best utilize your time. But what I did may not necessarily be the best thing for you, so definitely take my advice with a grain of salt. So I'm going to talk about 3 things separately. Number 1 is the content review books, and that's an easy one to tackle. So I use the Princeton review books as well as the Kaplan books. I don't think you necessarily need 2 different sets. I purchased the Princeton review books and really enjoy using them. I think they did a good job covering the content that's on the exam. The Kaplan books I actually got from one of my friends who took the MCAT earlier. So if you have friends or family members who've taken the exam, definitely ask them if you can borrow their books. The second thing I want to talk about is actually a common question that people ask me. It's whether or not taking a test preparation course is necessary. I think it really depends, and you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. There are pros and cons to taking a test preparation course. So let's start with the pros. If, let's say, you are a visual learner or an auditory learner, and you know that you learn best when you go to lectures and you listen to the lecturer and you see things being drawn out on a whiteboard, then perhaps signing up for this course is right for you. And pros number 2 is that, at least for me, just signing up for a course really helped me stay on track. Just having deadlines took a lot of the mental stress and fear away. I wasn't worried about falling behind anymore because I was taking a course, and that really helped. Now let's talk about the cons of taking test preparation course. The first thing that comes to mind, and that's a really real issue that you need to consider before signing up, is the cost. These test preparation courses are not cheap, and it really is a big financial investment, and you have to figure out if it's worth it for you. And cons number 2 is also a very real problem that you need to think about. It's the fact that when you're taking a course with everybody else in the class, the learning isn't customized to you. So for example, you might go to a course on a Saturday afternoon and spend 2 hours listening to glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, which maybe you know really well. And if it was up to you, maybe you would want to spend those 2 hours studying physics or organic chemistry or an area that you're actually weaker in. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And the other thing about these types of test preparation courses is that the quality of your learning really depends on the instructors. I was really lucky that I had very good teachers that taught us biology and chemistry. However, personally, just as an example, I didn't really like my cars instructor, and I feel like I didn't learn much from that section of the course. So to summarize, thinking back, do I think taking a test preparation course was worth it for me? Absolutely, because like I said, it helps keep me on track and took away a lot of my mental stress. But whether or not I would recommend it to everyone, absolutely not. I think you should really think about how you learn best and whether or not this kind of courses would be the best approach to studying for the MCAT for you. And there are a few other resources that I heard were really helpful, but I didn't personally use. I just want to put it out there in case you want to do more research and look into them yourself. The top one that I've heard a lot about is UWorld. So UWorld, I actually only started using after I got into medical school. I used it for step 1 studying, and I'm planning on using it for step 2 as well. But I heard that they actually have a question bank for the MCAT as well, and a lot of people have been using it and they really enjoy using it. So definitely look into UWorld's MCAT as a resource. The other thing that a lot of people talk about is actually Reddit. There is a subreddit thread on there. People not only talk about some actual practice questions and how they approach those questions, but also people talk about the resources they used and what they liked and didn't like about their study methods. So if you're studying for the exam, definitely check it out. And last but not least, there's also a flashcard app called Anki that a lot of people actually use for the MCAT. Again, similar to the UWorld, this is something that I only discovered after I got into medical school, and it's actually a really popular app for medical students. But I heard there is a free Anki deck that you can just download, and it's been helpful to other people. So check it out if you're willing to. Another key part of my study resource was practice exams, and there are many different types of them. There are the official AAMC practice exams that you can purchase online. I believe there are 4 of them. 3 of them are mock exams that you get actual scores for, and there's 1 of them that is a sample AAMC test that you do not get a score for. Those AAMC practice exams are really, really good. They are probably the most accurate and the most reflective of the actual questions on the exam that you can find that's out there. So I would definitely recommend you to take them to number 1, get familiar with the layout, the type of questions, and number 2, to just slowly build up your physical and mental stamina in preparation for taking the actual exam. And I would say save those AAMC practice exams toward the end. So what kind of exams can you take before then? There are many other test preparation companies that offer practice exams. For example, Kaplan has their own version of practice exams. Princeton Review also has practice exams, and there are other test preparation companies out there as well. So one thing that I would say about those practice exams is that I personally find them to be much harder than the actual exam. So if you don't get a score that you're happy with from a Kaplan or a Princeton Review practice exam, definitely don't get upset. So a little bit about my own experience of using practice exams. I took the actual exam at the end of April during my junior year, and because I was still a full-time student in school, I wasn't able to study for the MCAT full-time. And I started studying in January. And thinking back, I think the first practice exam that I took was actually way before I started to officially study for the MCAT. I took it over the summer after sophomore year, so about a good 5 months before I officially started to study for the MCAT. I remember, I think the Princeton Review was offering a free full-length on-site mock exam that you can just sign up for. So I went with a friend, and we both sat down for 8 hours that day and took the entire exam. We walked out feeling pretty horrible about ourselves because we didn't know anything about the exam, we didn't prepare for it, and I think we got scores in probably the low 500s at best, and I was okay with it at that point because I knew that wasn't going to be a good predictor of my actual performance given that I had done 0 preparation. And I would definitely recommend that if you are taking a full-length exam early on in your studying period, just use it as a learning tool just to see what the exam is like, and do not get upset if you're not doing well, because you're not supposed to do well in the beginning of your studying. That's what studying is for. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the general tips and advice that I have to offer for the actual test day. The thing that nobody actually talks about, and I think is super important having gone through these exams, is that you have to pick out the right clothes. You have to make sure you're wearing comfortable clothes, preferably in layers. So if it's too hot, you can take layers off, and if it's really cold in the testing room, you can put on layers. That's the most important thing, and probably the second most important thing that you can do to make it a smooth and easy day for yourself is to wear something with as few pockets as possible. If you're a girl, wear a pair of leggings. If you're a guy, try to pick out jeans or jackets without that many pockets. The reason I say that is because when I went to take the exam, I actually wore a jacket with many pockets. There were pockets on the sides, there was a zip pocket on the side of my arm, and I wore a pair of jeans that had big pockets as well as those tiny little pockets on the side where I don't even know what you put in them. I think they're supposed to be coin pockets. But what happens when you go to these testing centers is that they are very strict with everything, with all the rules that they follow. So for us, they were actually checking every single pocket. They asked you to turn the pocket inside out so they can see that there's nothing in your pocket before they let you go into the exam. And that actually happened every single time you took a break. So whether or not you went to your locker to get a snack or you went to the bathroom, every single time before you re-enter the testing room, they check every single pocket. And those times, they all add up. They count as your break time. So if you want to make the process smoother and not waste time, make sure you wear the right clothes, which I definitely did not do, and I've learned my lesson. And the other thing that you should do is to make sure you schedule your MCAT exam early. I've also learned that lesson the hard way because I don't remember the specific timing of how I scheduled my exam, but I didn't do it as early as I could, and I actually had to take my MCAT exam in a different state, and that's just inconvenient. You want to take it close to your home or close to your school, so you don't have to worry about how you're going to get to the testing center and all the commute shenanigans that you have to deal with on your actual test day. Another tip that I have to offer when you're studying for the MCAT is to practice active learning. What this means is that when you're going through those content review books, instead of just highlighting, make sure that you are summarizing what you're learning from these paragraphs and you're synthesizing the information that you're getting from reading those books. This is something that I've learned in the past few years as I took more exams, and I certainly wish I did that instead of just highlighting all of my books when I was studying for the MCAT. And the other thing that I recommend you to do is to thoroughly review every single practice exam that you take. I know it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to do that, but perhaps when you're planning out your schedule, plan out one day to take a practice exam and then don't plan out any active learning the next day. Just spend the next day going over all the questions that you did, both the ones that you did correctly and also the ones that you did incorrectly. Because for the questions that you answered correctly, you never know if you got it right for the right reason. And you want to make sure that you are learning all the content and you're understanding everything as thoroughly as possible. Another thing that I found to be really helpful for exam taking strategies is that if you can learn to think like the exam writer, then a lot of times you can increase your score and enhance your performance a lot. So when you're going through questions, start to ask yourself, start to practice this way of thinking. What is the exam writer trying to test me? What concept are they trying to get me to use? Or perhaps is there a similar concept that they're trying to make me distinguish by getting the correct answer? If you start to practice thinking that way, it can really help you on the actual exam day. And another thing that you can practice doing and see if it's right for you, at least for the CAR section, so the reading comprehension section, is to see if you do better if you read the questions first. A lot of times you can spend a lot of time reading the passages and realize that only 20% of what's in the passage is being tested. So one way that you can go about that is to read the questions first, see what they're trying to get you to understand from the actual passage, so that when you go through the passages, you kind of know what to look for, what specific parts of the passage to spend more time on. I found it to be really helpful for me, but I also understand that this approach is kind of a point of controversy. Some people say they absolutely hate this way of doing questions. So when you're studying, try it out for yourself and see if that helps you do better on your exams. All right, so story time. I was actually on vacation with my boyfriend when I got my score back. It was probably 3 to 4 weeks after the actual exam date, and I remember being really nervous because I knew the score was coming out that day. I think they post on Twitter when they're announcing the scores. And I remember kind of just wanting to find a corner so I could check my score in peace and kind of process it before I share it with my family and friends. So I was definitely very, very nervous and very anxious, and I imagine that a lot of you will be too, and just know that it's okay. A lot of people go through that. I was really happy to find out that I got a 523 on the exam, which to my pleasant surprise actually landed me in the 100th percentile for the MCAT, at least for that specific one. Thinking back, I think I was happy with how I studied for the exam, and spending 4 months preparing for the MCAT part-time worked for me. There are definitely things that I wish I could do differently, some of which I've discussed in this video, and I hope just by sharing my own experience, it motivates you and encourages you, and also helps you to know what kind of resources to use, how to plan out your schedule. If you have any more questions that I didn't talk about in this video, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will try to answer them and help you to my best ability. If you enjoyed this video and found it to be helpful, please like, comment, and I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye.